Hi everybody and welcome to today's Q&A session. We'll just give it a few minutes and let everybody join and then we will get started. Hi Devlin, hi Kelly. Nice to see you both again. Wait for a few more people. As always, if you have any questions that you want us to address in this session, please just pop them in the chat. We don't have much prepared for today, so hopefully you can ask me some questions. If not, I'll maybe show you some of the things that have come up. One of the things that I do at LiveCode is the tech support, so I can maybe show you a few of the things that have come up recently that might be useful, but if you do have any particular questions, please do just pop them in the chat. Hi Gabby, hi Samuel. So I'll just mention this now, but I'll mention it again if we get a few more attendees in the room, is that this is the second to last Q&A session. So the last Q&A session will be next Thursday. And I'm going to show you a slide in a bit about our other learning series that we're doing, which is the lockdown learning series. But just to let everybody know that this is the second to last one of these sessions that we'll be doing. So hopefully some of you will be interested in the lockdown learning and I'll get to spend a bit more time with you. But bring all your questions today or next week otherwise. Hi Lonnie. Right, so I'm gonna show you a slide here. So let me just bring this up and I will share my screen so you can see it. So as I was saying, yes, Thursday the 18th of June will be our last webinar in this Q&A series. So we've got today's and we've got next week's. What we're doing is we're now running our lockdown learning series. And what we've done is we've chosen the 25 best sessions from our previous conferences. So we've done live conferences, you know, in a hotel, different places, and then we've done 2 online conferences. So 2017 and 2018, we did online conferences, we called them LiveCode Global, and last year we did a live conference in San Jose in California. So what we've done is we've taken the 25 best sessions from those, from the 10 conferences that we've done in the past, and what we've done is we've chosen sessions that are interesting and varied, but also still relevant to LiveCode today, because I think the oldest session that we have is from 2008, and it's actually it's a history session. But in terms of the technical sessions that we're doing, we have chosen ones where everything that's discussed in the session is still relevant to LiveCode today. So things might look a bit different. The LiveCode IDE has changed, things like that, but all the content will still be relevant. And then we're also doing 5 brand new sessions as part of this. So to say thank you all for being part of this and for coming along to our Q&A, we do have a 50% off code for you all for the lockdown learning sessions. So that's the code there. I'll put it in the slides that we send out as well, but if you want to take a note of it. And then the website, it's livecode.com/lockdownlearning. Let me just hide that. So this will give you 50% off the lockdown learning. I've written lockdown learning code on the slide, but oh yeah, no, code is right. So it's a 50% off the lockdown learning series. So this is the code. There's actually, oh, excuse me. Oh, excuse me. So there is the lockdown learning series, which is the 25 sort of old sessions and the 5 brand new sessions. And there's also an option to add the 10 previous conferences as well, if you want to, but you can see all that on the web page. So that's your code. And if you have enjoyed these, then hopefully you'd also get something out of lockdown learning. The way that we're going to do it is there'll be a bit of an intro, then we'll show the session, then we'll have Q&A at the end of the session. So there'll still be time to discuss things and ask questions, things like that. So let me just have a quick look at the questions. Okay, so Devlin, if you've already purchased, I'm not sure what will happen. The best thing to do is to email support@livecode.com and Heather will be able to take a look at that for you. I'm not sure what she'll do, but she's the right person to talk about that. So just drop an email to support@livecode.com and I'm sure she'll do her best to sort you out. Okay, so I'll just hide this now. And what I'll do is I'll pop this up again at the end for anybody who wants to take a note of the code. But for now, let's get started with some questions. So Devlin's asked, I'm working with sound. Is there any commands for changing a tone or changing the frequency of a sound as it plays back? Now that's interesting. I don't actually know. So let's do some investigation, see what we can find. Okay, so I'm going to start with the dictionary. So you can play sounds, and we also have the player. So let's have a look at the player control. This is just something actually I don't know. It's not something that I have ever done. Now I don't think the player control has any controls like that. It's really just for playing. So there's the volume control, there's the speed, so the play rate. There's nothing particular to control things like the tone or the tone or the frequency of the sound. Now, there are some more options, certainly on mobile. Let's just look for sound and see what the options are. So these are just not much in the way of sound. I wonder if the mobile sound channels, that might give you a bit more control. So there are you can use the sound channels on mobile. It's not something that I actually know much about, but let's see. What would be an interesting one? Play sound on channel. Okay, so that gives you options like now, next, so you can queue them up. But I don't actually think there is much in the way of pitch and frequency controls, etc. That is interesting though. I'll find out from the engine team. It might be something that LiveCode Builder, which is something we've not actually discussed much, might have more control of, or it might be something that would require an LCB wrapper of a library or perhaps an external. That is something that I will find out what I can from the dev team, and I will put some notes in the slides and get back to you. Just writing a little note to myself to remember to ask. So Devon's pointed out there is a beep pitch, but it seems to only be on Linux. Oh, I'm still in LiveCode Builder there. Let me switch back. Yes, so that's just available on Linux. So and the beep sound, I'm not sure what options there are in there. Oh, so it's just the system beep. So it's just whatever the beep sound that your current system will make. Okay, so let's see what other questions do we have. Just now there was one from Kelly. I'm interested in opening a JPEG, reading the image data and sorting the colors into an array to make a color palette. And that's something that, again, something you're tripping me up with all these questions today. So let's import an image and see what we can see. Let's find a nice image. We've got some LiveCode logos somewhere. They probably don't have a lot of, they're pretty much one color, but let's go with this one because it's at least got a couple of colors. So I'm not sure how much information the image data will give you. We do have a lesson that might have some impact on this. So there's the image data. So that's the binary data. So in there, I think you can get some color information from the image data. So let's see. So each pixel is represented by 4 bytes. You can obtain the numeric value of any of the color channels for a given pixel using the byte num functions. There's a little example in the dictionary about the image data. So you could use that. So you would loop over all the bytes in the, or all the pixels in the image and build your array from that. So I'd start having a look at the image data, and let me see if that lesson that I'm thinking of is actually relevant. So if I remember correctly, it's a grayscale. It's a lesson about sort of doing things with grayscale images, but I'm sure it would be transferable. Let's see if I can find the one that I'm thinking of. Oh, so I think I was thinking of the image processing one, but let's have a look at this color image to grayscale one as well, because that might give us some clues about the color information. I'm just going to have a quick look at the properties. I don't think there's anything in the properties that is particularly relevant. I think we'd be having to use the image data. Right, so this is an old lesson. I don't know if any of you have, if any of you know Michael. He's one of my colleagues here. If you've done any, if you have been to any of the conferences or watched any of our videos, you might have met Michael. So yeah, so this is actually extracting the image data. So it's looping over all the image data. It's using it to decide if he needs a haircut or not. So yeah, so we've got a lesson here that loops over and uses the RGB data and the alpha data, and then thresholding, deciding if you actually need a haircut. So this might be a really useful lesson. And then converting a color image to grayscale as well. So I think it's probably doing something very similar. Yeah, so again, this is looping across the image, getting color data, converting it to grayscale. So yes, you would certainly be able to start with those lessons, and that should allow you to make an array of colors that you can then use to make your sort of your swatch. Okay, so what I'll do is I will include these lessons in the slides, but if you go to our lessons portal, which is lessons.livecode.com, and just search for image data, just so the name of the image data property, which is the one that you'll be using, they should both come up straight away. So yeah, it's the image data property of the image. Okay, so let me just have another look at your questions here. And then Devlin's asked, is there a way to access embedded location data in an image? So again, that could be something that is included in the image data. I'm really not sure. If it's the actual, the sort of the metadata of the image, that might be something different. I don't know if that is included in the image data. Let's have a look at this. What actually happens if we get the image data from here? Just resize my text in the script editor. Okay, so mouse up. Image data. Image that is called mobile1.png. Oops. Put that into a variable, and then we'll have a look at it and see what we can see. It's obviously quite large. Come on, LiveCode, you can do it. I believe in you. Well, maybe not. So in terms of extracting metadata from an image, I'm really not sure, but again, I will take a look at it. Oh, we got it there, but I'd stopped it. But it's binary data, so it's probably hard to look at anyway. So yeah, in terms of things that are in the metadata, like the location data, I'm guessing that you probably can, but I will take a look and I'll do some experimentation and see if I can get anything out of it that would be useful. Okay, let's see what else is in here. Sorry, I've not managed to answer either of your questions particularly well today, but so Lonnie's asked what preference feature controls the need to declare local variables. So that I can show you quite easily. So in here, I'm creating a local variable called tdata. It's not declared, that's fine. If I go to the edit menu and then options, so these are all the options for the script editor. So there's variable checking, live errors, bracket completion, bracket highlighting. I've got most of them turned off, mostly because I've been using LiveCode for a long time, since before any of these options were there. But these are all the options for the script editor. And variable checking is the one that requires you to declare your variables before they use them. So if I turn on variable checking, and then if I make a change here and apply my script, it will tell me that it can't create a variable with that name, explicit variables. So explicit variables is the name of the property that has been turned on by that menu. So now if I declare a local variable tdata and then apply, it's fine. So that is where that one is. So it's the edit menu. Oh, no, sorry. Edit menu, options, variable checking, live errors. That will show you if there's errors on a line as you type. So the way that error showed up for me, but it only happened when I applied the script. Live errors will show you errors as you're typing. Bracket completion completes your brackets for you. Bracket highlighting lets you see. So if you've written a long bit of code and you want to see where the brackets are, where they match up, you can use that. Control structure completion, I do use that one. So that's if you start a repeat loop or an if statement, it'll automatically put the end repeat or the end if for you. Autocomplete, so as you're typing, it will give you options for auto completion, and auto format that automatically indents your code when you hit tab. So the two that I use is I do use variable checking when I'm working on projects. I use the control structure completion for repeats and ifs, and I like the auto format, but have a play around with them, turn them all on, see what you like. But variable checking is the one that requires you to declare your variables. So I'm just going to turn that off for now, because otherwise I will forget about it. Is it different in Windows? Yes, it probably is. It'll be just in a slightly different place. You'll see here actually that on Mac, the menus change between, so I'm currently in the script editor, so these are script editor menus. So there's my autocomplete snippets and my options. But when I'm in LiveCode, I get a slightly different set of menus, and I think it's different on Windows. It probably might be in the edit menu on the script editor. I've got parallels here, but it runs quite slowly, and I'm also trying to run, because I'm also running the webinar software, it might be a bit slow, but I think it's probably in the script editor menus. It's definitely there. I will find it and I will put it in the slides for you. But yeah, it's probably in one of the menus on the actual script editor on Windows, I think. Oh, Lonnie's found it. Excellent. Maybe you can tell us where it is. Okay, so another question here. After loading a data grid multiple times, you see each instance in the project browser. I'm using delete group my data grid prior to reloading, but there's a list of data grids in the project manager. Can you delete used instances, or am I doing something wrong? Yes. So before we come back to that, Kelly has pointed out that it is also in the preferences. So that in the preferences, you've also got your options here. So that strict compilation mode is the equivalent of turning on the variable checking, or what was it called? Yeah, variable checking in the edit menu. These both just set the global property that will check for variables. So yeah, the two places to do it are in the edit menu, in the script editor, or in the preferences. Okay, so Lonnie, so I think what's happening is this is happening because you're deleting your data grid each time. So let me start a new stack and we'll see what is happening. So here is my stack, here is my project browser, and we're on Untitled 2. So at the moment, we've just got our Untitled 2 stack and our card. If can I make this a bit bigger? That's a bit more visible. I don't know if these need to go bigger as well. Okay, so that's probably a bit more visible now. So now, if I add a data grid, you will see that there is now a data grid here. If I expand this, there's also now a data grid templates substack, which has this is all sort of the library code that makes the data grid work. You usually won't have to worry about this, you can just ignore it. But this is all the sort of library scripts, everything that makes the data grid work. So all the data grid code, because the data grid is actually written in LiveCode, it's just a LiveCode, it's a group of LiveCode controls, and this is where it's all handled in all these libraries. And because data grid, so we haven't looked, I don't think we've looked at data grid tables and forms. So the data grid table is the sort of the basic one, the one where you just have columns and you set the data. The form is a more complicated one, and in this you can design your own row template here. So I'll make this, I don't know. You can add checkboxes, you can put in buttons, you can put in images, so you can actually design the row template for each row. And so if we come back to our data grid templates, you'll see that this card has a row template, and this is the row template for this data grid. And what happens is every time you add a data grid, another card with another set of data grid templates, etc., will be created. So now there's 3. And that's because each data grid is different. They're set up differently. They've got different columns, different behaviors. And so for each data grid on your stack, there has to be a corresponding data grid template in this data grid templates substack. And if you delete one, it'll ask if you want to delete it. You'll say yes. And it will usually then delete the corresponding card, but sometimes it doesn't. There's some bugs in there where it doesn't always completely delete it. So what might be happening is if you're deleting and recreating your data grid every time, this will just be growing. Like I say, it should delete it when you delete the data grid, but sometimes they get left behind. I think it's to do with controls being resolved. They won't be deleted if it thinks it's being used somewhere else. So you shouldn't have to delete and recreate your data grid every time. And I'm just going to quit LiveCode so we can have a nice fresh stack to look at. Just restart this. So you should be able to reload data into your data grid as many times as you want, and no more instances should be created. But they definitely will be if you actually delete the data grid and recreate it every time. So I'll just use my standard, my favorite, my capitals here. So let's give this 2 columns. I think it's country and city. No matter how many times I use this as an example, I don't always remember. But I think it's country and city. And then we'll add a button that will set our data grid information. So on mouse up, set the DG data because it will be an array because I'm using a JSON file to. First, I'll load in the file actually. So I'll put URL file, and it's in this folder. So special folder path desktop. Q&A sessions. I think it's in here. It is not. So is it just on my desktop? Yes, it's actually just on my desktop. Capitals.json. Into JSON, and then we'll set the DG data of group data grid 1. JSON to array. JSON. Let's just check that works. Yes. Okay, so if I now open up the project browser, we would expect to see two cards because one has the data grid template instructions in it and one has everything related to this particular data grid. So that's what we'd expect. Now I should be able to load this as often as I want to. So actually I'll name this load. And I'll also have one that clears it, just so we can see what's happening. So in the clear button, we will just set the DG data of group data grid to empty, and that should clear it out. We empty it, we load it, 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 and we should still just have that one data grid there. So that is how it should work. I'm not sure why you might be ending up with multiple data grids other than the fact that you're actually deleting the data grid and recreating it every time. And if there's a real reason that you need to do that, then go ahead. Maybe it's that deleting it in script doesn't actually delete the card, because you'll notice that when I created that second data grid, let's drag that on, come on. Oh, it doesn't want to create me a second data grid, but if you remember when I used the delete button to clear it and it popped up that message and asked me if I was sure that I wanted to delete it, and I said yes, and then it deleted the card. I wonder if just deleting it, if you're just using code to delete it, maybe it is not actually going through that whole process, the equivalent of clicking yes, I'm sure I want to delete it in that button. So I'll test that. So we can just delete group data grid 1. The data grid's gone, but the card remains. So that will be why. So if you are deleting your data grid in script, then it's deleting the control, but it's not deleting the associated card here. Whereas if you, it really doesn't want to let me add another one. Not sure why that's happening. Let me just restart LiveCode. So I think it's probably that in all that code that we saw in the data grid, in the Substack, all that code that does the data grid, that makes it work, that's probably handling that delete key message and popping up that dialog asking if you're sure, and then fully deleting the data grid, including the card on the Substack. And I think what's probably happening is if we're doing it in script, it's not going through that whole process. and therefore that's why you're getting multiple instances of your data grid. Okay, so let's see. So that's that one. Let's add another one. So we should get another card. Yeah, and let's do a third one so we can see what's happening. Okay, so we've now got 4 cards, which is what we'd expect. Now, if I use the delete key, I get this message: would you like to delete the record template, which is what's in the Substack? I say yes, it goes. But if I delete it in code, so what's this one called? Data grid 2. Then it's gone from my card. I just have data grid 1, but the card remains in the Substack. So that's maybe a bit of a bug with LiveCode. It should probably do exactly the same thing if you delete it in code as it does if you delete it using the delete key. But I think, Lonnie, that's probably what's happening, is because you're creating it and deleting it in code, it's not going through the sort of the full process to delete the data grid, and that's why it's hanging around. So I'll have a look into that, and what I'll probably do is I'll probably report a bug about that for the dev team to look into. But in the meantime, if you want to tidy up your stack, if you're careful, you can just go through and you can delete the cards that are relevant. And you should be able to work out which one's which. So I've added data grid 2. If we go to, let's see, probably in the custom properties, the DG props. So this is just to make sure that you're not deleting anything that you really need. So let's see. So there's the row template. So the row template, so this is the one we want to check. It's group ID 1057 of card ID 1056 of stack data grid templates, blah, 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 ending in 587. So here's our Substack ending in 587, and it's group ID of card ID 1056. So there's card ID 1056. So we know that this data grid is associated with this card. So when we delete this data grid, we can also manually delete this card. So what you can do is, if you want to tidy up your stack, but you want to make sure that you're not deleting anything vital that's still one of the data grids that you're using, then open up the custom properties for the data grid, go to the DG props, find the row template in here, and then these are the ones that you want to hold on to, I guess. If it's still in your stack, that's the one you want to keep, but you can delete the others. And this tells you exactly where it is. We know it's card 1056 of stack data grid templates, 159189300595587. But the chances are you've only got one Substack anyway. So should be relatively easy, and you can use that to tidy up your Substack a bit. So I'm just going to drink a little bit more water. Okay, so Lonnie, hopefully that's where all the references are. You can find them in the DG props, and you can clean up the ones that you don't need. And hopefully that will allow you to tidy up your stack. And also, if you do need to be completely deleting your data grid every time, I would try to avoid that, just because it's a lot more intensive. It's a lot more work for LiveCode to do. It's a lot more work to create the control and everything, and than just reset the DG data. Absolutely everything in the data grid is controlled by properties. So again, I'm going to show you a lesson. Still have lessons up here? No, I will start a new one. So all the properties, so just like any LiveCode control, so a button or a field or anything else, all the properties in the property inspector have an equivalent that you can set in code. So if you're doing something like, if you want to change the column titles, column names at the top in a data grid, because maybe you're using one data grid and you've got a bunch of different CSV files that you want to display, and they all have slightly different column names, or and you want to change that, then you don't have to delete and recreate your data grid every time. What you can do is you can use the data grid properties just like you would for a button or a field. So a button you can enable and disable, make visible or invisible in code. You can do exactly the same with all the data grid properties. And that means that you have sort of a level of control in your code that might mean that you don't need to create and delete your data grids as much. So in the lessons portal, we've got a data grid section. These are all in the dictionary as well, but the lessons are, I find them quite useful. So we've got a whole library of lessons about how to do things with the data grid. But right down at the bottom, we have one that's all the data grid properties. Like I say, these are also in the dictionary, but I'm just going to show you them here. So the example that I was using was changing the column headings. So all these properties can be set in reset in code. So here we go. It's the columns. So that's in the column labels. So anything that's in the property inspector can also be set in code. So that should hopefully allow you to do whatever you need to with your data grid without deleting and recreating them. And as we saw, you can just reset the data whenever you want to show different data. You can set it to empty to clear it. You can set it to a different file. So yeah, I would try and do that rather than creating and deleting things a lot. Okay, so we've got like 25 minutes left. Let me have a look to see if there's any other questions that I've missed. Okay, so it doesn't look like there are any other questions. So if you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat so that we can have a look at them. And then I will try and think of some things that we've not discussed that might be useful. And what we haven't done is we haven't looked much at all the widgets that are available, and we haven't talked about LCB at all. So we could always do a very brief overview of LCB. I don't know if anybody is maybe interested in writing their own. You can use LCB to write controls, so to write widgets, to write wrappers for libraries in other languages, to write externals, to write libraries in. You can write libraries in LiveCode Builder, or you can use LiveCode Builder to wrap a library in another language if it already does if there's a library that exists that you want to make use of. Oh, right, so we've got a couple of questions. So yeah, Kelly's pointed out that you can set the DG data to empty or to new data rather than deleting the control. So yeah, that's what I was trying to get at, is that rather than deleting the control, you can just delete the data and then you can reset it. So that'll be faster as well. It'll be much faster for your app to just reset the data than it would be if it was trying to recreate controls. Okay, and then Lonnie's asked, how do you use an SQLite database instead of a tab delimited text file? So yeah, that's a really good question. I have an SQLite. I was testing something in SQLite the other day, so maybe I have an SQLite database that I can use here. Let's see. I do. I have one called Small Test DB, which sounds like exactly what we want. So let me bring that over. I can find it here. Oh dear, undo. Okay, so that is my messy desktop, which is normally over here, so you don't all have to see it. So let me just move this. Oh, I just want to move. Sorry, just give me a sec and I will try and sort this out. There is my small test DB, so at least that's there. We can. Okay, there we go. Where was my small test DB? There. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up in this DB browser. So that we can see what's in there. So this was, I think this was to look at a question for a customer. So there's not much in here. There's not much in the way of data, but we can use it as an example. So what we want to do, we'll create our stack, and we need to connect to the database, we need to query the database, and then we can put the results into our data grid. So let's create our data grid first, and we're just going to use a very, very simple query. So let's just pick one of these tables. Okay, so let's use people. Right, so we'll just use a very, very basic one. So add a column, name, and that's what we use to display it. And then we will connect to our database. So first we will connect, and then we will query. What I'm going to do is I'm going to call commands on the card script, because then I'll use a script local variable to store the database connection. So let's call this db connect. And in query, let's do db query. And then we'll actually implement these on our card script. So we've got the command db connect and the command db query. And a script local variable to store the connection to the database. So local s connection. So to connect to the database, so LiveCode comes with drivers for SQLite, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and ODBC. So to connect to a database, you use Rev Open Database. You give it the type of the database, etc. So MySQL, ODBC, Postgres, Oracle. I missed Oracle. So yeah, Rev Open Database, and what that does is that opens a connection to the database. So should be an SQLite option in there. So I'm just going to copy that. So this will give us our connection to the database. And for SQLite, you just have to give it the full path to the database. So ours will be special folder path desktop and slash small test db. And SQLite works on all the desktop platforms and on the mobile platforms. So you can include an SQLite database in your app and it'll be accessible. So if you want to include a database that has data for your app, you can do that and it'll work. And this will give us back a numerical connection. And we'll put that into S connection. And then down here, where we query it, we'll need to use that connection again, which is why I use the script local variable. And we construct the SQL query that we want to answer. So we want to select name from people, wasn't it? I think it's people. Yes. So we put that into our SQL. So we'll call this T query. And then there's two ways that you can run a query on the database. You can query it and get back a record set ID, which allows you to sort of loop through all the records and extract whatever you want from them. And there's the other option, which is data from query. We'll use rev data from query, which just gives you it back as a block of text. So you tell it what you want the column delimiter to be, the row delimiter, you give it the database ID and your SQL query. So we will here, extend this again. We will just put rev data from query. So we want our column delimiter to be tab, our row delimiter to be return. Our database ID is S connection. Our query is T query. We'll put that into T data, and then we can just set the DG text of group. I think that's still data grid 1. Yeah. T data. Hopefully this will just work. Let's try it. So we connect, we query, there's our results. So if I put a breakpoint here, so we've got our connection, it's 186. So this is obviously a very simple one. In a real app, you'd want to check that the connection is still open. You wouldn't want to keep opening connections. So you would store this, but then maybe each time you used it, you would use a function to return it, and that function could check that it was still open, and if not, reopen it, etc. But here, we can assume that it's just still open. We construct our query, rev data from query, fields or columns separated by tab, records or lines separated by return, the connection, which is 186, the query we've constructed, and that will give us back our return separated list, and then we can put it straight into the data grid. Now, you might not want to use data from query because you might not just want a block of text back, in which case it is rev execute SQL. And it's very similar. You give it the database ID, you give it the SQL statement, and this will return you a record set ID. And you can then loop through that record set, and you can loop through it, and on each record you can get the fields that you want, etc. And then when you get to the last record, you can check that you're on the last record, and then you're finished. And so if you want to do that, you can use that to construct an array. And of course, if you're using an array, you would set the DG data. So it should be nice and simple as long as you're familiar with databases and SQL. You should absolutely be able to use a database as your data source and a data grid as your display method. So Devlin has asked, I'm researching how to interact with the browser object via JavaScript. Is there a lesson on that? I think that there is a lesson on that. Let me check. But I will show you that the main way with the browser object is just to set the JavaScript handlers. That's the property that you need. Is there a lesson? I think there probably is, but let's check, see if we can find the right one. Search for JavaScript. Maybe we don't have a lesson on the JavaScript handlers. Probably should. Something we can add. Okay, so no lessons. Let me see, I don't know if you guys have joined the forums, but they are really useful. I quite often find things in the forums that I don't find anything else, don't find anywhere else, or don't know. Browser widget. Let's see if any of these look helpful. That's building a website or web app. This is one of the things that I'm not super familiar with. I haven't done a lot of web coding or PHP or JavaScript or anything like that, but definitely, maybe this, interacting with JavaScript using the browser widget. That sounds useful. So maybe the guide is actually a good place to look. So if we have a look here, we should have a guide on the browser widget. There it is. So this is just in the dictionary. If you go to the guides tab, then these are all the guides that we have. And there should be one for pretty much all the widgets, including browser widget. And so let's see, so this has a bit more information in here about how to, we've got a section here, it's not very long, interacting with JavaScript. So it allows your LiveCode handlers to be called from JavaScript, set, and it can be set to a list of LiveCode handlers, which appear as methods attached to a global LiveCode object. So hopefully that is at least enough to get you started. If not, then I'll ask somebody on the team if they can do a lesson on it, and I'll also have a look and see if I can find any more substantial documentation. But the forums is always a good place to look as well. And then you've asked, I'd like to be able to store a JavaScript library, CSS, and HTML file internally. So if you want them to be part of your stack, I would suggest just making them custom properties. So you can store all that information in a custom property and just access it when you need to. If they need to be part of your stack, otherwise I would just have them in external files and load them in as you need them. So I think it'll really depend on how you need your app to be set up. If they can be external files, then use external files and use special folder path to access them. Use special folder path resources to get things that are next to your stack. If they need to be part of the stack, then I would just put them in custom properties and access the custom properties when you need them. Hopefully that should do what you need. I'll see if we do have more documentation on the browser widget and how to use it, because I think there's quite a lot you can do with it, and we could probably do with a bit more in-depth documentation on using the browser widget and what's possible. So I will look into that as well. Lonnie's asked, are slides available for sessions 7 and 8? They should be. I will double check with Heather and see if they have been added to the videos. Yeah, she might just not have had a chance to do them, but they've been written, so they exist. Whether they've been made accessible to you, I will double check. So Kelly's saying I too have not seen slides attached to the recorded session. Okay, so I will double check with Heather and ask her to check if they are all where they're expected to be, and get her to update those if we need to. Okay, so let me see if there's any other questions here. Okay, so yeah, no more questions just now. So we've got a little bit of time left. So I think, yeah, so I'm going to show you a few things came up with the browser widget, like I've never shown you the guides. So we have guides here for example, our navigation bar. These are a bit more in depth. You know, they've actually got screenshots, how to use things. So if you haven't looked at the guides in the dictionary, those can be really useful. The map widget, all the widgets, they should have guides associated with them that go into a bit more depth. Another nice thing is that you can actually open the documentation by opening the context menu for the control, and you can click on show documentation, and probably would have helped if I had got rid of that. And it'll open up the documentation for you. You can also do that from your script, which is also really nice if you don't know that this is a feature. So let's see, pick the click lock. And you can right click here. Oh, maybe you can't do that. I'm thinking of going to definition. So if I was calling a command, say hello, let's see, which is implemented on the card script. So command say hello. And from the button, if I wanted to see what was going on, I can right click, I can go to definition, and it will jump to where that command is. And once your apps start getting quite large, that can be really useful. If you're calling commands and functions, they could be in a group, they could be on a card, they could be on a stack, they could be in a substack, they could be in a library. If you're looking at an app that somebody else has been working on, or if it's just been a while since you've looked at it, it can be super useful. I mean, that's a really simple example because it just goes to the card script, but wherever that command was implemented, you would be able to jump it jump to it like that. Yeah, about the slides, I'm not sure if there's a better way to do it. Heather, I think Amish decided to do it that way for a reason. I think that with Webinar Jam, we get the recorded session, but there's no way to attach the slides to it, so they're attached to the YouTube video. I don't know if there is an easier way to do it. I mean, one thing I could maybe do is Heather obviously sends you out emails, so perhaps we could include a link in those. At the end of the session, we can absolutely send you all the slides, links to, they're just on Google Docs, so we can send you the links and we can send you sort of the downloaded version PDF or as slide documents that you can open. I will mention it to Heather. I don't know if there's a better way to do it. Obviously, we're also towards the end of the session, but it will be useful if we do anything like this again to know that it wasn't the easiest way to find them. So I will mention it to Heather, and I will get her to double check the last couple of sessions and make sure that they are there and add them if they haven't been added yet. And yeah, see if she can perhaps send out an email once. I think it's because I usually write the slides, and it can take me a couple of days after the session, whereas I think she sends out the videos as soon as they're available, which is why we don't include the slides in the emails, but we'll certainly try and make them a bit more accessible. And certainly after next week, when we're done, sadly, I can send out all the slides to everybody so that you'll have access to them. Okay, so we've only got a few minutes left. So the first thing I'm going to do is there's one more session left, and it hasn't been included in the links to sessions that have gone out so far. So there will be a new link for next week. So apparently in the webinar software, I can give you access to it if I can find it. So where is it? So if I click this button now, let's see what happens. I've never done this before. So that should give you all access to the link for next week to join next week's webinar. So hopefully that will be accessible to everybody. And I think Heather will probably send out an email to remind everybody as well, because we've sent out the invites, I think, in blocks of 3, and this is the last of these 3. So next week's is a separate one. Yeah, so I'll ask Heather to check 7 and 8 because those seem to be the ones that are missing. 8 was the last one, and they might just not be up yet, but we will double check those. And then for the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to bring up the slide about the offer again in case anybody joined a little bit late and missed it. So for anybody who did join later and missed the discussion at the start, next week will be the last of our Q&A sessions in this series, but we're running the Lockdown Learning series now, and we have a 50% off code for all these Q&A, these Learning LiveCode Q&A attendees, which you can use to get 50% off if you choose to join us for Lockdown Learning. So the Lockdown Learning sessions, they're usually 2 a week. When we're doing the 5 brand new sessions, those will be slotted in. So I think it's Tuesdays and Fridays, and the live sessions will be slotted in on a Thursday. So they won't be every week because there's just 5 of them, but they will mostly be 2 a week or 3 a week. And once they're done, all the resources, and so any slides, the videos, any resources will be accessible through your LiveCode account. So it's actually already started. So if you do decide to join and you've missed the first one, then you'll have access to it from your account. So you might have missed the live one, but you won't miss out on that one. So Lockdown Learning, if you're interested, that is next. Lonnie, you will have to ask Heather. I don't have the power to decide that for you, I'm afraid. if anybody does want to get in touch with Heather about if you purchased it in advance of being given this code, then email support@livecode.com and ask Heather to look into it for you, and she will be able to decide what to do. I don't want to put words into her mouth or decide what, or say what she might decide, because I really don't know. But do, if you've got any questions, do email support@livecode.com and talk to Heather. And yes, next week, sadly, is our last session. So if you do have any questions that you've not had a chance to ask yet, please bring them next week. And same time next week, you should have the link to rejoin. And I will see you all next week. So have a lovely evening, everybody. And I will see you same time next week. Thanks for coming, everybody.